The National Association of Evangelicals community from coast to coast in our great land deeply appreciates and values his love for the truth of the Bible and his commitment to its great moral values. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Reverend clergy all, Senator Hawkins, distinguished members of the Florida Congressional Delegation, and all of you, I can't tell you how you have warmed my heart with your welcome. I'm delighted to be here today. Those of you in the National Association of Evangelicals are known for your spiritual and humanitarian work, and I would be especially remiss if I didn't discharge right now one personal debt of gratitude. Thank you for your prayers. Nancy and I have felt their presence many times in many ways, and believe me, for us they've made all the difference. The other day in the East Room of the White House at a meeting there, someone asked me whether I was aware of all the people out there who were praying for the president. And I had to say, yes, I am. I've felt it. I believe in intercessionary prayer. But I couldn't help but say to that questioner after he'd asked the question that, or at least say to them that if sometimes when he was praying he got a busy signal, it was just me in there ahead of him. I think I understand how Abraham Lincoln felt when he said, "I have been driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go." From the joy and the good feeling of this conference, I go to a political reception. Now, I don't know why, but that bit of scheduling reminds me of a story, which I'll share with you. An evangelical minister and a politician arrived at Heaven's Gate one day together. And St. Peter, after doing all the necessary formalities, took them in hand to show them where their quarters would be. And he took them to a small single room with a bed, a chair, and a table, and said this was for the clergyman. And the politician was a little worried about what might be in store for him. And he couldn't believe it then when St. Peter stopped in front of a beautiful mansion with lovely grounds, many servants, and told him that these would be his quarters. And he couldn't help but ask. He said, "But wait, there's something wrong. How do I get this mansion while that good and holy man only gets a single room?" And St. Peter said, "You have to understand how things are up here. We got thousands and thousands of clergy. You're the first politician who ever made it." But I don't want to contribute to a stereotype. So I tell you, there are a great many God-fearing, dedicated, noble men and women in public life, present company included. And yes, we need your help to keep us ever mindful of the ideas and the principles that brought us into the public arena in the first place. The basis of those ideals and principles is a commitment to freedom, personal liberty, that itself is grounded in the much deeper realization that freedom prospers only where the blessings of God are avidly sought and humbly accepted. The American experiment in democracy rests on this.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. We want you to be a part of the program, and it is Johnny Cash Friday. That's right, Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day and week. Sometimes, we cover stories that they might have slipped through the cracks, if you will, but then sometimes Fridays turn out to be a big news day. Let me go over what we have for you today. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about China, some more, trade deals, different kinds of studies out there suggesting that these tariffs have actually created American jobs. We'll tell you about that study. Also, we want to tell you a little bit about what happened in Arkansas yesterday because the Satanic Temple was in the state, specifically at the Marble Palace, where they unveiled their Baphomet statue. They called it a Satanic Temple First Amendment rally. They're upset because the Ten Commandments are now on the Capitol grounds in the form of a monument. And, of course, there's a lawsuit and everything else. So they decided to turn out and rally. The Democrat Gazette has a string of photos that you need to see, I think. Also, we'll talk about the minimum wage today. The minimum wage is going to be on the ballot. Secured enough signatures, so we will once again try to explain why the minimum wage is a terrible idea, why raising it doesn't make anybody any more prosperous, and it actually hurts the very people that it purports to help. We'll tell you about that. Then at the top of the next hour, 7:05, we'll be talking with Senator Linda Collins-Smith. She will be laying out her case as to why the term limits initiative that's going to be on the ballot this year is not a good idea. Of course, I think it is a good idea. We're going to have a respectful discussion, and we're going to walk away as friends. And then at the bottom of the next hour, at 7:33, we'll be talking with Jan Morgan is going to be back on the program. I just decided I asked her to be on after we had the news that the governor is now open to supporting gun control measures like red flag laws. That was in the news yesterday. So we'll be covering all of that today and more here on Conduit News Radio. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, it's not every day. It's not every day that the vamp works out to where it ends right as the Johnny Cash music ends, but it worked out that way. So I didn't plan that, just so you know. Sometimes it just works. So I found this. Let's start here. Let's start with this Google article, okay? So Google is working with the Chinese to essentially provide their service, but do it the way the communist Chinese government wants them to do it, which is to, have these censoring capabilities in there. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised, and I'll tell you why we shouldn't be surprised here in just a minute that Google's doing this. This is by Kate Conger over at the New York Times. The New York Times writes that hundreds of Google employees are upset at the company's decision to secretly build a censored version of its search engine for China. They've signed a letter demanding more transparency to understand the ethical consequences of their work. In the letter, which was obtained by the New York Times, employees wrote that the project and Google's apparent willingness to abide by China's censorship requirements, quote, raise urgent moral and ethical issues. They added, currently, we do not have the information required to make ethical, informed decisions about our work, our projects, and our employment. So we have people here working for Google. Internally, they're like, hey, wait a second. Why would you want to work for the Communist Chinese? Well, I think, maybe we need to ask some of our officials in Arkansas the very same question. But why would we want to be working with this company? Why would we want to be enabling them to censor their citizens and to censor their search results? Why in the world would we want to be doing that to the Chinese? Because it sounds to me like some people in Google think that the Chinese government isn't exactly looking out for the best interest of all the citizens of China. Seems to me that's at least some of the speculation. Maybe they don't believe that the Communist Chinese, are supporting the First Amendment, the First Amendment doesn't apply, obviously. The American First Amendment doesn't apply. But the concept of freedom of speech, yeah, you're exactly right. They don't. They don't support that open exchange of ideas and dialogue if it's something that goes against the party. I think it was a week ago. It was a week ago Friday we were giving you the story about how the movie Christopher Robin is banned in China because among Chinese dissidents and among the underground in China, they compare the president, Xi Jinping or whatever, to Winnie the Pooh. They believe that that's a funny caricature. They think that he kind of looks like Winnie the Pooh. And so, yada, 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 Christopher Robin, the movie with Winnie the Pooh, which I haven't seen, by the way, is banned in China. It will not be released in China because Winnie the Pooh is offensive. The president's like, it goes against the party, goes against the Communist Party. They want to protect their leader. They want to see him, exalted and everything else. Did I read somewhere where they put a photo of the president where a cross was or something? Hey, Joe, will you Google that on one of the other computers? I want to see this. This just dawned on me. I'm pretty sure the Communist Chinese recently removed some sort of religious symbol and replaced it with a photo of the president of China. This was in the news recently, I'm telling you. And it might have been, I don't know, I would just Google something like replaced with president of China's picture or something like that. I can't remember where I saw it. But anyway, so back to this. So Google is upset, or Google employees are upset. They're like, why are you doing this? The New York Times says the letter is circulating on Google's internal communication system and is signed by 1,400 employees, according to 3 people familiar with the document. The internal activism presents another obstacle for Google's potential return to China 8 years after the company publicly withdrew from the country in protest of censorship and government hacking. China has the world's largest internet audience, but has frustrated American tech giants with content restrictions and outright blockages of services, including Facebook and Instagram. So, this is interesting. 8 years, Google's potential, the internal activism presents another obstacle for Google's potential return to China 8 years after the company publicly withdrew. So, for some reason, 8 years ago, Google had a problem with working with China if they were going to censor their citizens. But now they don't. I wonder why. I'll tell you what I think here in just a minute. Joe, did you find the article?
Yeah. So this is an article from Christianity Today. China tells Christians to replace images of Jesus with communist president.
I knew I didn't dream this.
This was about a year ago.
Oh, okay. It was a year ago, huh? I wonder why I saw it recently. I mean, it seems like I saw it, but anyway, I thought there was something more current, but it does exist that they are, that's what they're doing. They're also tearing down churches and everything else. And Arkansas politicians, or let's just say Arkansas, our economic development policy here in Arkansas is to get in bed with the Chinese as fast as we possibly can. That's what we want to do. We're it doesn't make any sense. Do you want to know why I think Google's had a sudden change of heart when it comes to participating with the Chinese government and allowing, building them something that's going to censor and everything else? Well, it's because they're censoring conservatives. I mean, if the tech companies conspire and collude with one another to ban content that they don't like all at the same time, if they are okay with shadow banning conservatives or, now coming up with fake news filters and things like that, why wouldn't they? I mean, if Google has changed from 8 years ago to now, assuming that Google ever had the best interest and it wasn't just, a company that was out to make money like most companies are, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but we've got news now that Google's now tracking everything you do. Even when you turn off your geolocation settings, they're still tracking you and everything else. I mean, the surveillance, and then if you look at the blurring the line between the government and Google, it gets really scary really quickly. But the bottom line is this. The higher-ups of Google probably just see themselves as being consistent. I mean, if they're going to be the arbiters of what appears on the search results and they're going to contemplate, maybe we don't need this media or that media, along with the rest of the tech giants in Silicon Valley, well, then working with the communist Chinese government to censor what their citizens can see is pretty much a natural progression, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's pretty consistent here. So for these Google employees to be outraged that the higher-ups of Google are working with the communist Chinese and going to allow them to have a Google apparatus that is, conforms to the communist Chinese party standards of censorship. I mean, the employees, I think, need to look around and look at what the rest of the tech companies are doing to censor content that they don't agree with. And, of course, we're saying over here, like, well, the government's not involved, so it's not a First Amendment right issue. It may be a freedom of speech principle issue, but it's not a First Amendment right issue. Folks, antitrust laws are going to come into play here at some point. They're going to look at whether or not these companies have a monopoly. They're going to look at, and I don't know what the end result is, but at some point they're going to start looking at the internet like it's a public sidewalk. I just feel like that's where we're going. That's where we're headed down. We're headed down that path, no pun intended. Because I just used sidewalk. You see how that works? Anyway, so we'll keep an eye on this and report, but tell me what you think about it. I mean, is it really a big deal that China and Google are colluding with one another to, they're just really being consistent if you really want to think about it, and these Google employees need to think about, what a slippery slope it is. When you're, in the tech industry, in the big Silicon Valley tech industry, you start to ban content that you disagree with just because it's, conservative or political or conspiratorial or whatever. Well, then don't be surprised when now we have, there are no private companies in China, so you're working with the government. I mean, in a way, it may be foreshadowing. The lines between these private companies and public government are blurring faster in almost every sector, almost every industry. We talked about how it's happening in healthcare and what a danger that is, and it's happening more and more in tech. I mean, when you look at the what the surveillance state in America was attempting to do with some of these companies, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, the rest of them, in some of the disclosures that came out over the last couple of years, having to run all of their research and development ideas past the government so that the government had backdoor keys in case they ever had to get in. This is all facts. I mean, this is all stuff that is real technological stuff and revelations that we now know about. I mean, in that case, you have these, quote, private companies who are being subverted by the federal government, but it's actually much, much worse than that, isn't it? Because the companies are fine with it. The companies are willing participants. They're not going anywhere kicking and screaming. They're not trying to fight this. They're not trying to stand up for their rights, by extension standing up for your rights and your privacy. No. I mean, I think we're already there. These so-called private companies are subverted by the the interests of the government, and you can make some national security arguments I'd be willing to listen to here and there for a lot of this stuff, but the bottom line is I think the veil of a private tech company is now kind of out the window. Now, we have seen some some things that Facebook is doing in a world that is not monolithic, if you will, not unified. You got countries that are not unified, so you got to wonder, what with this whole Cambridge Analytica stuff. Remember when the Cambridge Analytica thing happened, they blamed it on Trump. It was all about Trump, 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 and the Trump campaign. But then all of a sudden, it ended up with Mark Zuckerberg before a congressional committee. Facebook stock took a big hit. People have been dumping Facebook. By the way, the CEO of Microsoft recently dumped a bunch of his stock. That was interesting. That's barely made any press at all. I saw one headline over at CNBC. Everybody's looking into Elon Musk right now for potential manipulation, the Securities and Exchange Commission. I wonder if people are going to look at Zuckerberg and these other people who are selling off their stock because they know something. Anyway, that's in the news on China. I just want to give you a little Chinese update because so far I haven't heard anything from, I don't know, I guess the deals here in Arkansas are still on hold because of Donald Trump's trade war with China. Of course, China's coming back to the table because looks like it's been a good negotiation tactic. I saw that you had White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow, also, former, I guess his radio show is being held in, like he's not able to do the radio show, but I think the Larry Kudlow show is still out there. It just has guest hosts. Is that right? Anyway, so he's been saying, look, he's no expert in China, but China's economy looks terrible right now because of the tariff situation. And that leads me to this study. Breitbart has an article this morning, and I haven't really looked at this study, but John Bender reports that President Trump's protective tariffs on imported steel, aluminum, solar panels, and washing machines have created more than 11,000 American jobs over the course of 6 months, a new study revealed. It was a study done by the Coalition for a Prosperous America. I've never heard of this group. But I'm just telling you that there's a study out there that says that Donald Trump's tariffs thus far have created 11,000 American jobs throughout the country, a far cry from the job losses that were predicted by the free trade economists and pundits. Here's a quote from the report. The national media is generally ignoring the job creation arising from the country's new strategic trade posture. This information is important. These jobs will have substantial positive effects on local economies and the national U.S. economy, according to economist Jeff Ferry. They are in general well-paid manufacturing jobs and high-productivity businesses. These new jobs will contribute to the creation of thousands of service sector jobs, and they will stimulate local economies. The CPA study found notable increases in domestic steel and aluminum jobs. In the steel industry alone, nearly 5,000 manufacturing jobs have been created. In the aluminum industry, a little less than 3,000 manufacturing jobs have been created thanks to Trump's tariffs. Again, this according to the Coalition for a Prosperous America, their study on what these tariffs have done so far. What do you guys think? You think that's true or not? I'm sure there are other economists that would disagree. In conservative circles, tariffs are a no-no, right? Well, in some conservative circles, tariffs are a no-no. But hey, the Chinese are coming back to the negotiation table. When you don't get to define negotiation according to your terms, remember Trump walked away from the negotiation table with the Chinese. No, he didn't. No, he did not. This was all part of the negotiation, seems to me. It's Johnny Cash Friday. For our online audience, you guys are listening to President Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech. Back in a minute.
Insight. Its discovery was the great triumph of our founding fathers, voiced by William Penn, when he said, if we will not be governed by God, we must be governed by tyrants. Explaining the inalienable rights of men, Jefferson said, the God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. And it was George Washington who said that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And finally, that shrewdest of all observers of American democracy, Alexis de Tocqueville, put it eloquently after he had gone on a search for the secret of America's greatness and genius. And he said, not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and the genius of America. America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. Well, I'm pleased to... I'm pleased to be here today with you who are keeping America great by keeping her good. Only through your work and prayers, and those of millions of others, can we hope to survive this perilous century and keep alive this experiment in liberty, this last best hope of man. I want you to know that this administration is motivated by a political philosophy that sees the greatness of America in you, her people, and in your families, churches, neighborhoods, communities, the institutions that foster and nourish values like concern for others and respect for the rule of law under God. Now, I don't have to tell you that this puts us in opposition to, or at least out of step with, a prevailing attitude of many who have turned to a modern-day secularism, discarding the tried and time-tested values upon which our very civilization is based. No matter how well-intentioned, their value system is radically different from that of most Americans. And while they proclaim that they're freeing us from superstitions of the past, they've taken upon themselves the job of superintending us by government rule and regulation. Sometimes their voices are louder than ours, but they are not yet a majority. An example of that vocal superiority is evident in the controversy now going on in Washington. Since I've been involved, I've been waiting to hear from the parents of young America. How far are they willing to go in giving to government their prerogatives as parents? Let me state the case as briefly and simply as I can. An organization of citizens sincerely motivated, deeply concerned about the increase in illegitimate births and abortions involving girls well below the age of consent, some time ago established a nationwide network of clinics to offer help to these girls and hopefully alleviate this situation. Now again, let me say, I do not fault their intent. However, in their well-intentioned effort, these clinics have decided to provide advice and birth control drugs and devices to underage girls without the knowledge of their parents. For some years now, the federal government has helped with funds to subsidize these clinics. In providing for this, the Congress decreed that every effort would be made to maximize parental participation. Nevertheless, the drugs and devices are prescribed without getting parental...
a hard break here, but there's also a story this morning in the national news that the Trump administration is nearing a deal with Mexico and a revised NAFTA situation, which has been one of the biggest things that Donald Trump has said for a long time, is that the NAFTA deal has killed American jobs and was a disaster. Here's the thing, but Canada's not quite on board yet, according to this report. Canada's kind of like, well, we still have some issues to work out. Have you seen what Saudi Arabia is doing to Canada when it comes to their relationship, economic relationship? There's a dispute there. Find that pretty interesting. Anyway, when we come back, I want to tell you about some Arkansas news we're going to get into next segment about the Satanic Temple, and we're going to get into the minimum wage argument once again. So don't go anywhere on this Johnny Cash Friday. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Back in a moment.
Consent or giving notification after they've done so. Girls termed sexually active, and that has replaced the word promiscuous, are given this help in order to prevent illegitimate birth or abortion. Well, we have ordered clinics receiving federal funds to notify the parents such help has been given. One of the nation's the nation's leading newspapers has created the term squeal rule in editorializing against us for doing this, and we're being criticized for violating the privacy of young people. A judge has recently granted an injunction against an enforcement of our rule. I've watched TV panel shows discuss this issue, seen columnists pontificating on our error, but no one seems to mention morality as playing a part in the subject of sex. Is all of Judeo-Christian tradition wrong? Are we to believe that something so sacred can be looked upon as a purely physical thing with no potential for emotional and psychological harm? And isn't it the parents' right to give counsel and advice to keep their children from making mistakes that may affect their entire lives? Many of us in government would like to know what parents think about this intrusion in their family by government. We're going to fight in the courts. The right of parents and the rights of family take precedence over those of Washington-based bureaucrats and social engineers. But the fight against parental notification is really only one example of many attempts to water down traditional values and even abrogate the original terms of American democracy. Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. When our founding fathers passed the First Amendment, they sought to protect churches from government interference. They never intended to construct a wall of hostility between government and the concept of religious belief itself. The evidence of this permeates our history and our government. The Declaration of Independence mentions the Supreme Being no less than 4 times. In God we trust is engraved on our coinage. The Supreme Court opens its proceedings with a religious invocation, and the members of Congress open their sessions with a prayer. I just happen to believe the school children of the United States are entitled to the same privileges as Supreme Court Last year, I sent to Congress a constitutional amendment to restore prayer to public schools.
So we'll make that.
Already this session, there's growing bipartisan support for the amendment, and I am calling on the Congress to act speedily to pass it and to let our children pray. Perhaps some of you being held during the students' own time. The First Amendment never intended to require government to discriminate against religious speech. Senators Denton and Hatfield have proposed legislation in the Congress on the whole question of prohibiting discrimination against religious forms of student speech. Such legislation could go far to restore freedom of religious speech for public school students. And I hope the Congress considers these bills quickly, and with your help, I think it's possible we could also get the constitutional amendment through the Congress this year. More than a decade ago, a Supreme Court decision literally wiped off the books of 50 states statutes protecting the rights of unborn children. Abortion on demand now takes the lives of up to 1.5 million unborn children a year. Human life legislation ending this tragedy will someday pass the Congress, and you and I must never rest until it does.
Some of the guests, obviously, that come on this program, and I, excuse me, was I cutting out just then? I keep up with some of the guests that are on this program and, follow them. And one of the reasons we have a lot of the guests on this program is because I agree with them and their point of view. So when I saw that Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch was in the news, it caught my eye. We interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. Now, that's not to be confused with the white nationalist Richard Spencer. This is Robert Spencer. He's been around a lot. Well, in terms of conservative circles, Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch, he's been very outspoken against, radical Islam and everything else. Very knowledgeable. He's an author, extremely intelligent. Well, I found this interesting. MasterCard forces Patreon to blacklist Jihad Watch's Robert Spencer. I mean, the censorship continues. MasterCard has reportedly forced funding platform Patreon to kick conservative author and Jihad Watch owner Robert Spencer off its site. Quote, "My name is April, and I'm on the trust and safety team here at Patreon. I've been notified by MasterCard that we must remove your account from Patreon effective immediately. MasterCard has a stricter set of rules and regulations than Patreon, and they reserve the right to not offer their services to accounts of their choosing. This is in line with their terms of service, which means it's something we have to comply by. I have paid out the remainder of your creator balance via direct deposit. I'm sorry for the inconvenience and frustration this might cause." Despite this, Spencer claimed he doesn't use MasterCard and didn't have a MasterCard that was attached to the Patreon account. This is what Patreon said on Twitter. Hey, we've been emailing with Robert today to explain the situation, as unfortunately MasterCard required us to remove his account. We will continue to email him if he has further questions. Also, then Robert Spencer said, "Patreon, be honest, please. You haven't been emailing with me. You sent me one email saying that MasterCard wouldn't work with me, which was weird since I don't have a MasterCard. No explanation was offered. When I asked for one, you didn't answer. That's not emailing. I'd been given no warning before this that anything was amiss with my account, so what violated their rules? They hadn't explained," Spencer declared. "Never explained why MasterCard objected to my account or why they had to comply with MasterCard's wishes and didn't answer my request for an explanation." Hang on a second. I got a text coming in that may be relevant to some of this. What is this that just came in? No, different situation. Now, Spencer noted that he could have been shut down due to the Southern Poverty Law Center listing him on its extremist files for criticizing Islam. Spencer's Jihad Watch website is a strong critic of Islamic extremism, according to the site. Why Jihad Watch? Because non-Muslims in the West, as well as in India, China, Russia, and all over the world, are facing a concerted effort by Islamic jihadists, the motives and goals of whom are largely ignored by the Western media, to destroy their societies and impose Islamic law upon them and to commit violence to that end. While their overall goal remains out of reach, that effort goes under the general rubric of jihad. Now, stop right there. What is wrong with him saying that? Apparently a lot. I mean, the tech media has been given notice. They have been told, shut it down. Shut everybody down who says something that is not in line with our arbitrary way of thinking. It is really, really concerning, and it should worry everybody. And, when they banned Alex Jones, when they started banning Alex Jones, there were some people, some so-called conservatives that said, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead and do that. Yeah. But, the question is, okay, who's next? And these Silicon Valley monopolies are essentially, they're starting to shut everybody down. Twitter took down Gavin McInnes. Did you hear about that, Joe? Gavin McInnes, he's banned from Twitter for life. He's banned. No more. And he's a libertarian guy that he's very entertaining to watch. He's, he'll say just about anything. He also, he's unapologetically honest. He'll say just about anything, and that makes the left furious. It's like, well, what? I thought the liberals used to love the idea of individuality and freedom of speech. Not anymore. No, they only love the idea of individuality if you want to be a transgender. That's what it feels like. Oh, protect the individuality. You want to be a transgender. Well, what if you want to say that, I don't know, the stuff that Gavin McInnes has said on Fox News before. Remember, he almost has just basically trolled other women to their faces when he says, you might be happier if you were married to a man. You can't say that. No. You can't say something like that because that's offensive. You can't stand up for that guy's individual right to think what he wants to think, to say what he wants to say. So if it doesn't conform with their safe space snowflake mentality that looked really good and, this new wave of Marxism, I mean, that's what it is. Marxism, it has been a failure historically. It results in millions of people dead. And so in order to ignore that, let's bring Marxism back with class warfare and identity politics. That's what's going on right now. This group is bad. This group is the oppressor. This group is the victim. And now we have essentially, we're going to try this Marxism thing one more time, see how it works out. Maybe it'll be different this time. It really looked good on the chalkboard at Harvard or Yale when the professor was explaining it to me. This is how society should work. Give me a break. We got to get those greedy capitalists. Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch says he believes his removal from Patreon is part of a larger trend. He told Breitbart News, "This seems to me to be all part of the general attempt to silence all dissenting voices and leave only leftists speaking in the run-up to the 2018 elections." You talk about election meddling. That is what the big Silicon Valley people are doing. They are now meddling in the election. That's what this is, because they think they lost the election because of free speech, because of freedom of speech. Now, they would say, well, yeah, it was freedom of speech, but it was freedom of speech and people were putting out lies about Hillary. They were putting out all these lies and conspiracy theories, and that's why Hillary lost. Give me a break. You really think that's why Hillary lost? Because of fake news, a term that you coined, and President Trump has turned it around on you? That's an example of falling into your own net. Fake news. You guys were projecting, weren't you, CNN, MSNBC? You are projecting, oh, it's the fake news media, when you, in fact, are the fake news. You're the one that leaves the relevant facts on the cutting room floor. You're the one that cloaks yourself in a false objectivity, like you're the arbiter of the facts. You don't want the people to get the facts and interpret the results for themselves, because most people in flyover country are conservative, and they'll interpret things the way you don't want them to interpret them. So you can't give them the whole unvarnished truth. You have to keep them blind. And your little stranglehold over the country wasn't as strong as you thought it was in 2016, was it? And it's because of the freedom of speech, you think. You think it's because people were able to go on Facebook and they were able to post links to websites that don't have CNN in the domain name, or MSNBC, or don't have a Snopes.com somewhere in there. That's why. I mean, that's why you're doing this. Now you're going to crack down and say, well, we've really got to stop. We've got to, because for some reason, I get the feeling that some people think their very livelihoods and lives depend on the Democrats taking back the House so they can impeach Donald Trump. Because he is so anti-status quo, and he is messing up every established norm. I mean, they thought, I don't know what Hillary Clinton was going to do as president. I know she was going to appoint Supreme Court justices, and I know the concept, and this is going to make a lot of people really upset when I say this. If you're maybe just a casual listener, but if Hillary Clinton had won, the freedom of religion in this country would have been only limited to what you do one day a week inside four walls underneath a roof. You would have no rights. You would have absolutely no rights to live out your religion in worship to God in public life. Period. Okay. I'm sorry, I got a little heated there. But they are purging dissenting views. And it is... It should raise... we should just raise the alarm. I don't know what... I don't know. I would like to think that there's some opportunity here. Like, so there's is there going to be an opportunity if Facebook just no more conservatives? If YouTube, no more conservatives. If all these... Okay, you can't be conservative. All right, well, you would like to think, okay, well, there'll be an opportunity then. Somebody else can start some social media platform will start up that welcomes all views and doesn't discriminate. Really? How are people going to find out about it? Well, you could have enough startup money, I suppose. Well, when people Google social media, Google, right. They love conservatives, don't they? How do you even get people to figure out about the competition? I mean, that's where the antitrust laws could come in. I'm telling you. That's where it could really happen. There was a rally yesterday, Satanic Temple. They're mad that the Ten Commandments statue monument is up at the Capitol. I want to remind everybody that the Ten Commandments monument is up at the Capitol because there was a bill written. It was voted on in 2 committees in 2 chambers. And it became law. There has been no such bill that's made it through 2 committees and 2 chambers and become law and then was denied for a satanic Baphomet statue, half goat, half man, half woman statue. There has been no law passed and then somebody was denied having the statue placed on the grounds. If that had happened, you might have a case, Satanic Temple. But this whole lawsuit about the Ten Commandments is from, I think, some atheists that ride their bikes by the Marble Palace every morning. And now that they can see the Ten Commandments statue, I don't know, they feel judged. They feel insecure. They feel, I don't know, maybe they feel like they don't meet the mark. Welcome to the club on that one. No, the reality is, they're contriving some sort of hurt feelings. They believe that that's an establishment of religion, and that hurts their feelings. They believe that the government, by putting a Ten Commandments monument on the Marble Palace grounds, they feel like the government is endorsing that religion over all other religions, which is, of course, preposterous. That's not, well, I mean, I guess you could say that maybe they are endorsing a religion, but there's nothing unconstitutional about that. I mean, in order for this to be unconstitutional, this is very clear. You go read the text. Go read the text of the Second Amendment or the Fourth Amendment or whatever. I like to go back with what it says. In order for there to be a violation of your religious freedom, Congress has to pass a law saying that this is the religion that you need to follow, or that this is the Congress has to pass a law. Congress has to pass a law. There's no law that Congress has passed respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's what the text says. Look at some of these photos. Can we look at these photos, Joe? So there was a few people there. Now, there was one pastor that was there and spoke at the rally and claimed that he was a Christian. He's speaking at this satanic rally saying he's standing up for the First Amendment and I guess the separation of church and state or something. And then somebody shouted him down and said, I'm paraphrasing, but I heard the tape. Basically, you're no more a Christian than a demon in hell, is what one person shouted at this man claiming to be a Christian who was speaking at the Satanic Temple First Amendment rally. You had some people there with a cross that said repent, protesting, had a Confederate battle flag there, had a Don't Tread on Me flag there. You had people in black. Most of the Satanists were in black, and they were one guy was in armor of some kind. Click on this one. Click on that guy who is with the pink devil horns. Yeah, look at this guy. Look at this guy right here. My goodness. This guy has some sort of goat mask on, and he's applauding something. This is really just sad, terrifying. You got to feel for these people who are blind to what they are doing. We need to recognize what look at this guy with armor. Look, what is it? He's got some sort of armor on. Yeah, that guy there, but then there's a close up further down, Joe. Do you see this? This guy has some sort of knight's metallic armor on. What is that? Oh my goodness. So there's, then you see the goat guy in the background. This guy looks mean. What about that guy? Hang on. What about that guy right there? Yeah, that guy looks like he's pretty angry. Why do the police have him? He's being escorted out. He's got a metal chain around his neck with a lock on it. Yeah, this is what was going on at the Marble Palace yesterday. And, of course, they brought their Baphomet statue, which is pretty terrifying, with the children looking up at the Baphomet statue with the male phallus right there, and you've got the goat head, and yeah. And this, they claim that they're being discriminated against, and yet they were allowed to show such perverted images on the Capitol grounds yesterday in protest, all because the Ten Commandments are there. Pretty sad. But again, hey, listen, according to them, they don't have a worldview, right? See, their little argument only works in a vacuum where they can never do the thing that they're accusing others of doing to them. Right? Because whether they are, well, if they're Satanists, they actually are more of a worldview. But traditionally, this argument works. I think some of them claim, well, we're just doing this for the First Amendment, separation of church and state. But it never works. I mean, if you really take their arguments to the end, I mean, they haven't been discriminated against because there's been no law passed. No, I'm sorry, I don't know why, but for some reason, the Satanic Temple, they just can't find a legislator that's going to run their bill to put a Baphomet statue next to the Ten Commandment statue. Now, if they can find a representative in our representative republic to do that for them, and then you get the rest of the General Assembly to vote for it, 51% or higher in both chambers, and then you decide not to place the statue out there, then you have a case. Go find your representative. And they've admitted that they've tried to, and they couldn't. We've got to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. Back in a moment.
Unless and until it can be proven that the unborn child is not a living entity, then its right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must be protected. You may remember that when abortion on demand began, many, and indeed I'm sure many of you, warned that the practice would lead to a decline in respect for human life, that the philosophical premises used to justify abortion on demand would ultimately be used to justify other attacks on the sacredness of human life, infanticide or mercy killing. Tragically enough, those warnings proved all too true. Only last year, a court permitted the death by starvation of a handicapped infant.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
I have directed the Health and Human Services Department to make clear to every health care facility in the United States that the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 protects all handicapped persons against discrimination based on handicaps, including infants. We have taken the further step of requiring that each and every recipient of federal funds who provides health care services to infants must post and keep posted in a conspicuous place a notice stating that discriminatory failure to feed and care for handicapped infants in this facility is prohibited by federal law. It also lists a 24-hour toll-free number so that nurses and others may report violations in time to save the infant's life. In addition, recent legislation introduced in the Congress by Representative Henry Hyde of Illinois not only increases restrictions on publicly financed abortions, it also addresses this whole problem of infanticide. I urge the Congress to begin hearings and to adopt legislation that will protect the right of life to all children, including the disabled or handicapped. Now, I'm sure that you must get discouraged at times, but you've done better than you know, perhaps. There's a great spiritual awakening in America. A renewal of the traditional values that have been the bedrock of America's goodness and greatness. One recent survey by a Washington-based research council concluded that Americans were far more religious than the people of other nations. 95% of those surveyed expressed a belief in God, and a huge majority believed the Ten Commandments had real meaning in their lives. And another study has found that an overwhelming majority of Americans disapprove of adultery, teenage sex, pornography, abortion, and hard drugs. And this same study showed a deep reverence for the importance of family ties and religious belief.
Coming up at 7 o'clock, we're going to be talking with Senator Linda Collins Smith. Then at 7:33, we have Jan Morgan. Jan Morgan's going to talk a little bit about the news yesterday that was in the paper where Governor Asa Hutchinson is now supportive of gun control laws, red flag laws, wants to debate it in the legislative session. We'll have that story for you at 7:33. We'll be back in just a moment on this Johnny Cash Friday.
I have directed the Health and Human Services Department to make clear to every health care facility in the United States that the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 protects all handicapped persons against discrimination based on handicaps, including infants. we have taken the further step of requiring that each and every recipient of federal funds who provides health care services to infants must post and keep posted in a conspicuous place a notice stating that discriminatory failure to feed and care for handicapped infants in this facility is prohibited by federal law. It also lists a 24-hour toll-free number so that nurses and others may report violations in time to save the infant's life. In addition, recent legislation introduced in the Congress by Representative Henry Hyde of Illinois not only increases restrictions on publicly financed abortions, it also addresses this whole problem of infanticide. I urge the Congress to begin hearings and to adopt legislation that will protect the right of life to all children, including the disabled or handicapped. Now, I'm sure that you must get discouraged at times, but you've done better than you know, perhaps. There's a great spiritual awakening in America. A renewal of the traditional values that have been the bedrock of America's goodness and greatness. One recent survey by a Washington-based research council concluded that Americans were far more religious than the people of other nations. 95% of those surveyed expressed a belief in God, and a huge majority believed the Ten Commandments had real meaning in their lives. And another study has found that an overwhelming majority of Americans disapprove of adultery, teenage sex, pornography, abortion, and hard drugs. And this same study showed a deep reverence for the importance of family ties and religious belief. I think the items that we've discussed here today must be a key part of the nation's political agenda. For the first time, the Congress is openly and seriously debating and dealing with the prayer and abortion issues, and that's enormous progress right there. I repeat, America is in the midst of a spiritual awakening and a moral renewal, and with your biblical keynote, I say today, yes, let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Now, obviously, much of this new political and social consensus I've talked about is based on a positive view of American history, one that takes pride in our country's accomplishments and record. But we must never forget that no government schemes are going to perfect man. We know that living in this world means dealing with what philosophers would call the phenomenology of evil, or as theologians would put it, the doctrine of sin. There is sin and evil in the world, and we're enjoined by Scripture and the Lord Jesus to oppose it with all our might. Our nation, too, has a legacy of evil with which it must deal. The glory of this land has been its capacity for transcending the moral evils of our past. For example, the long struggle of minority citizens for equal rights, once a source of disunity and civil war, is now a point of pride for all Americans. We must never go back. There is no room for racism, anti-Semitism, or other forms of ethnic and racial hatred in this country. I know that you've been horrified, as have I, by the resurgence of some hate groups preaching bigotry and prejudice. Use the mighty voice of your pulpits and the powerful standing of your churches to denounce and isolate these hate groups in our midst. The commandment given us is clear and simple. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, it's Friday, and so that means that it's Johnny Cash Friday, and that means that we're able to bring you as much Johnny Cash music as we can. Yes. Yes. So we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can today, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. For our online audience, no Cash music, but you're getting President Ronald Reagan's address, his Evil Empire speech, which was very bold. Remember what the critics did? If you go back and listen to what they did, the critics of Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech, they couldn't believe he was saying what he was saying, and guess what? Well, history records that it worked out. Folks, I want you to welcome to the program. We have Senator Linda Collins Smith is back with us. Linda, thanks so much for coming on the program this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So proud to be with you all.
Yes, it's always great to have you on. Now, I wanted to have you on because there's an issue that's on the ballot this coming up this November. It's issue 3, and it's going to reduce the terms a legislator can serve in office from 16 years down to 10 years. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about this, and I understand that you don't think it's a good idea. There are other legislators that agree with you, and so I just wanted to give you the opportunity to come on the program and make your case as to why you don't think it's a good idea.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Like I said, Paul, I've listened to you for lots of years and love your show and love what Conduit News does, and so I just want to say that, and so with all respect, I just disagree that term limits are a good idea. First of all, I want us to quit having government be in our business. And so every time, you have to make decisions, so is term limit going to help that or is term limit not going to help that? I say that it hurts us. And I've watched that, but I want to say, first of all, I just think it's my right to decide who I want to vote for. And so limiting that doesn't make sense to me. If I have a good legislator, or whoever I'm voting for, if I have a good legislator specifically that we're talking about, then I want to be able to continue to vote for them. And so I ask you this, Paul, after listening to your show and the arguments, for term limits, I want to tell you that I'm against them. It should be my right to vote for a legislator that I like. And if I want to keep them, then I'm going to fight to keep them. We have natural term limits called vote them in and vote them out. If you don't believe that, Senator Collins Smith was a state rep once, and then she did not win a Senate race and turned around and ran again and won. And a natural term limit was the senator was not reelected. There are many people, even across the state, that are saddened that their senator was not reelected. But that's a natural term limit. But I fight for the rights of the people, and I think that there's no one can argue that I'm not just about Linda.
So are you arguing against no term limits at all, or are you arguing against the period of 10 years just being too short?
Well, I could say that 10 years is too short. I could, which I believe that it is, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That's to be specific. The other thing is, I think that a term is I vote them in and I vote them out. That's what people should do. They should pay attention. They should go out and find out who to vote for. And if they really like those legislators, if you have a legislator, Paul, that you could keep in there, would you vote to keep that legislator? Would you not want that legislator to stay if you could vote for them and keep them? And they're doing a good job. If they're not doing anything that causes you to want to vote them out, I mean, would you think that those people that did pay attention and did go to the polls, that 18% that wanted to keep Senator, for instance, they're pretty saddened that the other folks did not go to the polls. And so if you could, you see what I'm saying? Now, that's I want to say 10 years. I want to talk about that in a minute specifically, but a term is vote them in and vote them out. But the people have responsibility. And, Paul, they've got to go to the polls. They have to pay attention. Don't put all of this on the legislators. The people didn't pay attention before. I campaigned very hard when the terms were on the ballot for longer terms, when I was running for office. And so I'm going to tell you, I worked hard against that bill, not because, not just the terms was in it, though. It was a horrible bill. Horrible bill. It wasn't just about term limits. So there's a lot of reasons to kill that bill. A lot.
So I understand, and I have said for a long time now, well, I don't know how long we've been debating this particular issue. I guess ever since they got the signatures required to be on the ballot. I think you can make a reasoned argument for both sides of this. So I understand your logic. Yes, you will lose, and I see the point. You will lose good legislators who are doing a good job. They're not going to be able to serve as long. But you're also going to lose bad legislators who, through the power of incumbency, are doing things that are not in the will of the people. And with 18% voter turnout, there's an argument to be made that people need to get out and they need to, have more control over their government. But in terms, I see that point. That there is sort of a political triage where you kind of have to realize that, you will lose the good ones, but you know what? You're also going to get rid of the bad ones. And right now, and from my standpoint, Linda, there's not a lot of Linda Collins Smiths in the legislature. I think there's a lot of big government people that need to go home.
So are you okay with throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Well, you're still able to serve a decade, so we're not. I don't think we're throwing the baby out because we're still able to serve a whole decade, and that would be my next point would be, what about the idea of a career politician? There's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with career politicians. Go ahead.
Yes, and so I would say that would be that mentality of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that works. I don't think it works, and here's the thing. We'll talk about the decade. I don't care if they serve a decade if they're doing their job I elected them to do. That's my right to vote for them. Vote them in or vote them out. If they do a great job, why do I want to vote them out? If they're not criminals? Now, here's what I think happened. In the first round, and this term limits was on the ballot, and what I really believe is people are mad at John Wood.
Yes, they are.
And they are mad at him more than anything. If you want to know the truth, that is what I believe. That's what I hear. Because, see, the truth is, do you realize that when there were no term limits, we had criminals in the legislature? When there was term limits, we had criminals in the legislature. And you're going to cut it down to a couple of years? I mean, a few years in comparison. And do you not think you're still going to have criminals in the legislature? You will have criminals in the legislature or wherever if they choose to be. So I do not agree that shortening the term limits is going to help on the legislature side. What I do believe is this. The longer you are in the legislature, there could be more risk of, for instance, it's harder to get rid of someone. And when I say that is when you look at, especially where there are no term limits, incumbency, it is harder naturally, even if you're doing a good job, I guess, to get rid of a legislature. But is it, Paul, because Senator Colin Smith left? I'm not there any longer. Brian King, Senator King is not there, and he's a good conservative. If I could vote across the state here, and I could vote for Senator King, guess who I would have voted for? Senator King.
Right.
I would have voted to kept him in there. Why? Because what is it that he's voting on that, do I like the way he votes? Yes, and you've got to look at your overall votes. Yes, I do. Will I ever disagree? Yes, I will, but I promise you, changing your legislator out and them not knowing what's going on. I'm going to give you an example of why the short term limits are murder for the people. Look at in 2011 and 12 when I was in the House, some issue came about, and I can't remember the issue, so don't hold me to the issue specific. But in the last session, I jumped up out of my seat and I ran back to Senator Rice because Senator Rice was easy to get to. Because remember, seats come early in the Senate when they're calling you out by alphabetical order to vote. I read a bill. I jumped up out of my seat. I read back, as we were reading it, ran back to Senator Rice. Did we do this in the House? Senator Rice, didn't we do this in the House? He goes, Linda, I think you're right. So he said, go ask another senator. And I did as fast as I could. And seats came. Senator Clark had already voted. Senator Colin Smith. And I yelled, no, because that's all I had time. It was so fast for us on that issue. Something in my mind reminded me, we've already done that. Had I not remembered that, had I not been in the House, we wouldn't know that. That bill would have passed. But as I said no loud, somebody knew something was wrong. And as those legislators that I had already talked to, and some of us voted no, we were able to kill that bill. And so why those things can happen, they can slip past you. You're going to have a whole lot more of that. And I remember my first term in the House, that by the time I got to the Senate, I had learned a whole lot more. And you remember many, many things that have gone on. Well, if you're paying attention, or you hope you remember, if we can all have good memory, you're hoping you catch those things because someone might be trying to slip something past you. And, imagine that a legislator would do that.
So is the system so complex that it's just not possible to serve the people in a 10-year span? I mean, because that I don't dispute what you say, and I'm glad you caught. I'm sure whatever you caught was really good that you caught it, because I know you're a conservative. So, I mean, do you think there'd ever be a way to reform government to the point where 10 years would be enough, in your opinion?
Well, then, are you going to reform government so that you don't have the same bureaucrats in government and the executive branch? Because that's where they push that power. They know where those line item dollars are. They know where everything's at. So when you talk about the good or the bad, or is it good or bad, or it's their idea of what's good, let's say it that way, okay? Let's say someone else says, this is my idea of what's right. I don't always agree with Governor Hutchinson, as you know, and if I could change a few things in Medicaid and the funding of that by any name, any of the 4 names we've called Obamacare, if I could change some of that, I would. And some of that, I think, has been you look at how powerful the governor was on the line item issue that we all, just if you paid attention to that on the line item veto issue, that just sickens some people. It just sickens, but not everyone pays attention to that. If you've got legislators who are trying to fight it, which we did, we were not successful. We tried hard. It was like a battle. It was like blood drawn on the Senate floor, and it was just disturbing and sickening, and it was so sad. And so you think about that, had you not have some background about things and people that have paid attention, maybe that's not the exact perfect example, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
You've got to have people willing to fight, willing to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. We did that. And if you don't have that and you don't have the history, you see what you're losing? Do you not love that we have the history of David Ferguson, 30-something years in the legislature? What do you think is going to happen when you don't have any history, that when none of the legislators have any history past 8 years?
There definitely is an advantage to having David Ferguson's work at the Bureau of Legislative Research. He certainly is a wealth of knowledge there. Well, so let me ask you this, because my contention would be, with the term limits as there are now, or I'm sorry, with the term limits as they could be if the thing passes to 10 years, I feel like you're going to lose more big government politicians than you would smaller government politicians. So that being said, right now, Senator Linda Collins Smith, I mean, how many actual conservatives that believe in the Republican Party platform are there right now in Little Rock? I guess. I mean, what percentage do you think that there are? I mean, you don't have to give me a specific percentage, but
yeah.
So,
I guess I can only be sitting in the Senate. Of course, I'll tell you what. Think about the bills that passed last session. We passed we literally didn't have to. We did we expanded Medicaid again.
Yep.
It's a horrible. I was just so saddened because that's a bill we didn't even have to address. We didn't even have to have it on the calendar. So we have quite a few, and people wear down. And so sometimes that's what it is. But if you have enough conservative, there's strength in numbers. And so I think that, I couldn't give you the percentage. But I want you to think of this: the House versus. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say the only reason I say that is because, to me, once you run as a Republican, this is just how I see it. 10 years would be better, and I know you disagree, but once you run as a Republican, and then once you go back on what you said, which we've seen time and time again, we see all these justifications for these bigger government. If the faster we can get you out of there and term limit you out and get somebody else in there who's going to run as a Republican, who's going to claim that the Republican Party platform is what they believe in, I just feel like that would be better. Like to give somebody else an opportunity to actually keep their word to the people, because what we have seen in Arkansas time and time again, over the last almost 10 years now, is really, saying one thing that's popular with the electorate, but then coming back to them with excuses, and then those people wind up in leadership. And so, anyway, go ahead. I'll give you the floor.
Okay. All right. That exact thing that you just said, what good does it do then if that's the majority and they're going to lie to you? Why change them out at all? Because all you're doing is rotating the dollars. At least you have some history in there. They have some institutional knowledge. For instance, what you just said was that you can kick them all out. They're going to lie to you, and if they're going to lie to you, why have elections? Why not people? But truthfully, isn't the answer that the people pay attention and go vote? Isn't that really where it has to lie? Because just changing them out based on what you just said isn't going to do any good. The next round are going to be lying to us when they go out and run.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming that eventually. They lie to your face. Yeah, I'm assuming that we get these incumbents out, and we have the possibility of putting somebody who's honest in there that actually believes in what they campaign on. That's my hypothesis.
That work for you? But has it worked for you?
Well, right now, we've got way more big government people down there than we do, and they're able to serve 16 years, and so that's.
What do you think? Every 2 years they change out in the House. It's the same difference. No institutional knowledge right now because too many change out already. We're already seeing that just over the last few years.
Well, is it possible, do you think, to be down there too long?
Do I believe that you can be there too long? Yes, and I think I stated that it may be harder to get it in coming out, that you naturally have things that have been done that could make it hard to get people out. Yes, I do, but I still think that's but that I don't want to trade my right to vote the person that I want to. I don't want to do that trade-off. I want to be able to vote for the person that I choose, not because I'm forced them out and I've got to start all over again. I don't even know who they are for a few years. They don't even have a voting record, Paul, for a few years. You can't even tell what kind of people they are. Well, you can a few people. You and I know that. But I guess what I'm saying is you've really got to learn what that you can learn about a lot about a legislator in just a little, in a little bit of time. But it usually takes more than a session. We don't typically want to send people to Washington in a house for one term. You want to give them a chance to learn. Will they do better next time? Did they see their voting records? I'll tell you, one of the best things that I've ever seen was the voting record. Someone saying, "Hey, I don't agree with you. If you vote this way, you're voting for big government."
Senator Linda Collins-Smith, it's always great to have you on. I appreciate you coming on and giving us your honest opinion about this, and I respect it. And again, I believe you can make reasoned arguments to why it's a bad idea to go from 16 to 10. And I think you can make arguments on the other side as well. So I really appreciate it. It's always great to have you on.
Thank you, Paul. Bye, everyone.
Okay, folks, we have got to go to break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
But whatever sad episodes exist in our past, any objective observer must hold a positive view of American history, a history that has been the story of hopes fulfilled and dreams made into reality. Especially in this century, America has kept alight the torch of freedom, but not just for ourselves, but for millions of others around the world. And this brings me to my final point today. During my first press conference as president, in answer to a direct question, I pointed out that as good Marxist-Leninists, the Soviet leaders have openly and publicly declared that the only morality they recognize is that which will further their cause, which is world revolution. I think I should point out I was only quoting Lenin, their guiding spirit, who said in 1920 that they repudiate all morality that proceeds from supernatural ideas, that's their name for religion, or ideas that are outside class conceptions. Morality is entirely subordinate to the interests of class war, and everything is moral that is necessary for the annihilation of the old exploiting social order and for uniting the proletariat. Well, I think the refusal of many influential people to accept this elementary fact of Soviet doctrine illustrates an historical reluctance to see totalitarian powers for what they are. We saw this phenomenon in the 1930s. We see it too often today. This doesn't mean we should isolate ourselves and refuse to seek an understanding with them. I intend to do everything I can to persuade them of our peaceful intent, to remind them that it was the West that refused to use its nuclear monopoly in the 40s and 50s for territorial gain, and which now proposes 50% cut in strategic ballistic missiles and the elimination of an entire class of land-based intermediate-range nuclear missiles. At the same time, however, they must be made to understand we will never compromise our principles and standards. We will never give away our freedom. We will never abandon our belief in God.
When we come back, we'll be talking with Jan Morgan about gun control. Well, wouldn't that be confusing in the wrong context? We'll be talking with Second Amendment advocate, patriot Jan Morgan about Governor Asa Hutchinson's coming out for gun control red flag laws. Get her thoughts on those. I want to thank Senator Linda Collins-Smith for coming on and telling us her opinion about term limits. She does make reasoned arguments about how it's possible the lack of experience and everything else weighs down on a legislator, makes them less effective and everything else. One of the points that she made that I completely agree with is that everybody's mad at John Woods. I am one of those people. I am mad at John Woods. He lied to the people. The Arkansas General Assembly that voted for the law lied to the people. So what we have here, the reason we are facing this decision on the ballot, whether to bring term limits from 16 to 10 years or to leave them at 16, is because your government lied to you and intentionally deceived you with an amendment that was written to allow them to get more money and to stay in office longer. And the pendulum now is swinging even further to restrict this. And that's what happens. My point is we are here because of the unethical, immoral behavior of the General Assembly in the first place. That's why we are now here. Whether you're for the term limits or against the term limits, I think we need to understand we are here because of the immoral behavior of the Arkansas government as a whole and what they passed and how they lied and deceived their own people. They lied. Our own government lied to us actively. We will see you on the other side of this break with Jan Morgan.
But whatever sad episodes exist in our past, any objective observer must hold a positive view of American history, a history that has been the story of hopes fulfilled and dreams made into reality. Especially in this century, America has kept alight the torch of freedom, but not just for ourselves, but for millions of others around the world. And this brings me to my final point today. During my first press conference as president, in answer to a direct question, I pointed out that as good Marxist-Leninists, the Soviet leaders have openly and publicly declared that the only morality they recognize is that which will further their cause, which is world revolution. I think I should point out I was only quoting Lenin, their guiding spirit, who said in 1920 that they repudiate all morality that proceeds from supernatural ideas, that's their name for religion, or ideas that are outside class conceptions. Morality is entirely subordinate to the interests of class war, and everything is moral that is necessary for the annihilation of the old exploiting social order and for uniting the proletariat. Well, I think the refusal of many influential people to accept this elementary fact of Soviet doctrine illustrates an historical reluctance to see totalitarian powers for what they are. We saw this phenomenon in the 1930s. We see it too often today. This doesn't mean we should isolate ourselves and refuse to seek an understanding with them. I intend to do everything I can to persuade them of our peaceful intent, to remind them that it was the West that refused to use its nuclear monopoly in the 40s and 50s for territorial gain, and which now proposes 50% cut in strategic ballistic missiles and the elimination of an entire class of land-based intermediate-range nuclear missiles. At the same time, however, they must be made to understand we will never compromise our principles and standards. We will never give away our freedom. We will never abandon our belief in God. We will never stop searching for a genuine peace, but we can assure none of these things America stands for through the so-called nuclear freeze solutions proposed by some. The truth is that a freeze now would be a very dangerous fraud, for that is merely the illusion of peace. The reality is that we must find peace through strength. I would agree to a freeze if only we could freeze the Soviets' global desires. A freeze at current levels of weapons.
All right, we're in the home stretch here, almost completing our 10th hour of radio for the week. We really appreciate. By the way, this broadcast is available over at conduitnews.com for free podcast, video archives, as well as the Facebook page many of you are watching on right now. And we got a good and big announcement for you on Monday coming up. On Monday, excited to announce some new stuff. So anyway, stay tuned for that on Monday. Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. We have Jan Morgan is with us, Second Amendment advocate, friend of the program. Jan, it's always great to have you on.
Hey, great to be with you, Paul, too. How are you today?
I'm doing great. So your reaction, the governor of the state of Arkansas, your former opponent in the Republican Party primary, coming out for red flag laws. This was after a scare tactic hit piece by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, front page Sunday, essentially saying guns are bad and they kill people and everything else. And now the governor says, I'm for red flag laws, or for talking about red flag laws. What was your reaction, Jan Morgan?
Yes, I think he said that he would be willing to consider red flag laws. So I think that was a stick your finger in the air test to see what kind of reaction it would get. It was also a way to pacify the newspaper, who is on a tangent right now against the gun rights of the people of the state. But Paul, this is much larger than just a Second Amendment issue, and I can't stress that enough, which is why We have got to let our state representatives and our governor's office know that this is entirely unacceptable for the state of Arkansas. You're looking at not just a slippery slope, but a direct hit on the Second, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendment if a red flag law is passed in this state. So there is too much at stake, and if this passes, you're looking at a point of no return on those constitutional rights being violated. Once you start down that road, there's no end to it. So I'm absolutely, adamantly opposed, and we have to be very aggressive in our willingness to let our legislators know we will not stand for this.
What are we looking at here? I mean, I know you said the Second, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendment, but what would this practically? How could this be misused to deprive somebody of owning a firearm?
Oh wow, how much time do you have? I mean, it's not just owning a firearm. Here's what could happen. The whole standard under a red flag law, the standard is not whether there is probable cause, which is what we're supposed to have. The standard is there's no probable cause to believe that a gun owner has committed a crime, which the Constitution would, of course, require. Rather, the standard is some subjective determination about whether or not the gun owner represents some danger. Do you see the fear there? For example, let's say, I don't think the newspaper would be so excited about this if because of a secret complaint against the newspaper that the people there were unstable, that you would shut down the newspaper for 21 days and confiscate their presses until we could determine if the people at the newspaper were mentally stable enough to be doing what they're doing. I mean, you completely eliminate due process. Let's say you've got a particularly nasty divorce case going on, all right? And the potential ex-wife and one of her best friends decide to commiserate and say, okay, let's say that my future ex is mentally unstable, that he has a propensity for violence, that he has violent outbursts, and we're afraid of him. We think he's a danger to society. We think he's a danger to us and to anyone right now. He's explosive. Okay, you take those two complaints, and a judge will go into this house and, will have police go into this man's home and confiscate his firearms until someone can determine whether or not this guy is truly a potential danger to himself or anyone else. So there he is defenseless for that length of time. Secondly, who gets to make the decision, Paul, about whether or not you're mentally stable? Are we going to put this in the hands of some anti-gun psychologist who really has an attitude that America would be better off without guns? And this psychologist, by the way, who's making money the longer he or she gets to stretch out this counseling time they have with you to determine and whether or not you're okay. There's a reason our founding fathers gave us the Bill of Rights, and it's wonderful. And we must absolutely treat that Bill of Rights with reverence. Our founders have already been through these things. That's why they fled tyranny, and that's why we must be sensitive to any efforts to regulate or restrict or infringe upon our Bill of Rights. And these are three areas, Second, Fourth, and Fifth, that you could even make an argument that this is a First Amendment threat as well, because how many people are going to be afraid to stand up and speak out against a corrupt government, for example, when that same government is in a position to say, because this person says these outrageous things, they may not be mentally stable, and we think they're a threat. Do you see what I'm saying here?
It's extremely worrisome, and to say the least. And I was just kind of thinking as you were talking, I was going through some of these scenarios you were laying out in my head, and I thought, what do you do if somebody makes a baseless accusation and let's say you don't have the money? Let's say you're a poor individual, you don't have the money for an attorney and that sort of thing. So wouldn't this discriminate against people who have less money than maybe richer people?
Absolutely, it would discriminate against financially disadvantaged people. But we just have to stand up and say, this is not acceptable in our state government. I was on Lock and Load Radio yesterday because the anchor of that show was saying, Jan, I can't believe, I can believe some of these really liberal states are looking at the red flag law. I think there are 14 states right now considering this law. But he said, I am shocked that Arkansas is even willing to say, we'll consider it. He said, what the heck is going on in Arkansas? I said, well, I've been trying to warn people about this because
I ran a whole campaign against this whole
Yeah, exactly. I've been talking about this for over a year, but the people of this state just weren't listening. I think that it's going to be too late by the time people catch on to the fact that you're going to have to stand up to this current governor and to this administration and to the other Republicans and Democrats who are willing to fall in the ranks just because of pressure and because of fear of losing their jobs. Because we do have legislators right now who are more fearful of the wrath of a governor than they are of their own electorate, and that is a very dangerous position for the citizens that they represent. And look at Representative Mickey Gates as a perfect example. There's a guy that, what about his due process? Our governor is willing to, and a number of Republicans were willing to say, well, let's just, he needs to resign. He needs to get out of here. Well, maybe he does. I don't know if Mickey is guilty or not, but he deserves his day in court, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're innocent until proven guilty. The way the red flag law works, you are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent, and that is completely eliminates the due process clause. It eliminates the Fourth Amendment right to unreasonable searches and seizures, and so we just have to stand up. And Arkansas needs to be, the people of the state need to be strong enough and aggressive enough with our state government that we say, whoa, wait a minute, okay, enough is enough. So that we can stop the trend.
It seems most people, I mean, my initial reaction when I read the article in the Gazette saying that the governor was open to red flag laws, I thought, wow. I mean, he's essentially taking the position of his Democratic opponent, and that's very strange because in the Republican primary,
it's not strange to me.
He tried to take all of your positions. I mean, he tried to take all your positions, so he always tries to take the opponent's positions.
Right. Well, the primary's over. I think if the primary was still going on, the governor would have never stepped out there on this issue. But now that he's got the Republican nomination, he's willing to, start returning to his original self, who he really is. And I think over the next 4 years, Paul, we're gonna see more of who he really is. And all I can say is I told you so. And so, yeah. But anyway, we're going to have to, I am asking and pleading with your followers, the people who listen to this show, to please contact your state representative. We do have a few legislators who are starting to speak out against this, and we need to get behind those people and let them know that we appreciate their willingness to be firm and tell the governor, no, we don't want this, and not only because of the Second Amendment, but because of the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment issues. This is just a place that Arkansas does not need to go, because once we go there, Paul, it's like it's a point of no return.
This was all started by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette's piece, an emotional piece, kind of a scare tactic piece. Apparently, they did some numbers that said that Arkansas ranked number.
Their numbers. I have a problem with their numbers. We are researching, and I say we. There are a number of people right now who are doing some serious research about us being 7th in the nation. I'm asking, where did those numbers come from? 7th in the nation, most dangerous. But that article, yes, you're right. That is a direct response to that article.
And so he comes out, and so I wanted to talk about that. Yeah, the numbers don't. I don't know. Where was Illinois on that list? How is Arkansas with Chicago and their violence? How is Arkansas going to be worse than the state of Illinois with Chicago and the amount of deaths that they're having? That to me was a red flag. And isn't Chicago the bastion, like the liberal utopia for what they want gun laws and gun control laws to be, and yet it's so violent up there?
Right, exactly. And I just had this very argument on CNN. Yes, I did venture into enemy territory.
You did great, though. You did great, though. It was great.
That was crazy. I knew it was going to be that way. I knew it was. But, in fact, I called some of my friends at NRA TV when I was asked by a producer to be on. I said, should I do this? And they said, look, Jan, we have to go there. I know it's going to be miserable, but we have to go there because even if they just let you spit out a sentence every now and then, the people who watch CNN religiously, that may be the only truth they ever hear. So we did venture, but there is a willingness by the far left to just act like our Bill of Rights, our Constitution does not even exist for the sake of security. And our founders warned us early on that people who are willing to give up liberty for the sake of security deserve neither and will lose both. And I'm telling you, in Arkansas, that's what we're looking at. Not just on the Second Amendment, but on on a number of our amendments, our Bill of Rights.
Yeah, you are exactly right. And that's, we have a lot of work to do. I really appreciate you trying to get everybody out there to support their legislators, to tell them, hey, listen, we don't want anything to do with this. We need to shut it down before this even gets started. The bill in Arkansas is actually being drafted by Senator Will Bond, who's a Democrat, and the guy in the House name escapes me right now. But anyway, I mean, this
yeah, but hey, Paul, that governor that I ran against, the guy that I ran against, if we were still in the primary, let me tell you what he would be saying today about this red flag law. Oh, absolutely. We are not even willing to consider any form of infringement or any law that would infringe on the rights of the people of this state. We're not even going to discuss this. We're not willing to discuss this. Arkansas stands strong on the conservative values of the Republican Party and of course, the Bill of Rights of our people. That's what he would be saying if we were in primary mode, because that's what Jan Morgan would be saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's man, it's frustrating that I don't know. I mean, I would just ask the governor. I mean, come on, you have no shame? I mean, we all know if the primary were still going on, you would have never come out with a statement like this, ever.
Well, he doesn't worry about it because the people of the state are not engaged in their government, Paul. They're not engaged. We saw that with only 18% of voters voting in the primary. There are still people coming up to me today saying, I need campaign signs, I need T-shirts, I'm going to support you. I'm like, that race is over. You know, the shame is on the voters of this state, not the governor. He is just taking advantage of the opportunity that the people are providing him, which is an unengaged electorate.
Yeah.
And until we get them, so I'm going to spend the next 3 to 4 years trying to educate people and trying to make them understand what's happening, get them fired up, and to help, build the Republican base, the conservative base of the Republican Party, because so many of our conservatives have moved away from the Republican Party because they've given up. On the establishment end, they've just allowed the establishment side to take over, and that's not who the Republican Party is. And so, I'm going to work the next 4 years to help build up that conservative base. And I'm urging all of my supporters to get involved and get in the fight. Don't walk away. Please don't walk away. We need to stay in there. This is not the time to say you win. This is the time to get involved and say, no, we're going to fight until there's nothing left to fight for.
Jan Morgan, it's always great to have you on. It's so encouraging to hear you have that attitude, and I really appreciate your stance. And I think you should keep going on CNN and dominating because that's what you did. It was great.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
All right, have a great weekend, Jan. We'd love to have you on again soon.
You too, Paul.
All righty, folks.
Absolutely. Take care.
It's Johnny Cash Friday, and we're gonna take a break, and we're gonna be back here in just a moment.
Would remove any incentive for the Soviets to negotiate seriously in Geneva and virtually end our chances to achieve the major arms reductions which we have proposed. Instead, they would achieve their objectives through the freeze. A freeze would reward the Soviet Union for its enormous and unparalleled military buildup. It would prevent the essential and long overdue modernization of United States and Allied defenses and would leave our aging forces increasingly vulnerable. And an honest freeze would require extensive prior negotiations on the systems and numbers to be limited and on the measures to ensure effective verification and compliance. And the kind of a freeze that has been suggested would be virtually impossible to verify. Such a major effort would divert us completely from our current negotiations on achieving substantial reductions. A number of years ago, I heard a young father, a very prominent young man in the entertainment world, addressing a tremendous gathering in California. It was during the time of the Cold War, and communism and our own way of life were very much on people's minds, and he was speaking to that subject. And suddenly, though, I heard him saying, I love my little girls more than anything, and I said to myself, oh no, don't say that. But I had underestimated him. He went on, I would rather see my little girls die now, still believing in God, than have them grow up under communism and one day die no longer believing in God.
To defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
There were thousands of young people in that audience. They came to their feet with shouts of joy. They had instantly recognized the profound truth in what he had said with regard to the physical and the soul and what was truly important. Yes, let us pray for the salvation of all of those who live in that totalitarian darkness. Pray they will discover the joy of knowing God. But until they do, let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world. It was C.S. Lewis who, in his unforgettable Screwtape letters, wrote, "The greatest evil is not done now in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in concentration camps and labor camps. In those we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice." Well, because these quiet men do not raise their voices, because they sometimes speak in soothing tones of brotherhood and peace, because like other dictators before them, they're always making their final territorial demand, some would have us accept them at their word and accommodate ourselves to their aggressive impulses. But if history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. You know, I've always believed that old Screwtape reserved his best efforts for those of you in the church. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. It's been a great Johnny Cash Friday. We really appreciate you being with us and keeping with our reporting. If you missed the first hour of the show, you can get it. We talked a little bit more about China, how we have a letter that's being circulated inside of Google. They're upset that the higher-ups in Google are participating with China, going to build China the infrastructure they want that will allow them to censor and control their population. And for some reason, Google employees are upset with this. I pointed out the hypocrisy that the big tech in Silicon Valley and Google, they hate conservatives, and they're perfectly willing to censor us, kick us off of platforms. So it's pretty natural that you fit in good with the communist Chinese. So, I mean, you need to be thinking about what this movement is doing. On that, we have John Hayward over at Breitbart reporting that according to the Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, they are now telling their readers to remain calm as the economy of Turkey teeters on the brink of collapse. The interpretation here, though, is that the actual point of the editorial was to tell the Chinese, their citizens, that their country is in far better shape than Turkey despite grappling with their own currency crisis. So this is interesting, that what we have done to Turkey. All I got to say about Turkey is give us the pastor back, give us the minister back. I mean, you're messing with the wrong administration here, Erdogan or Erdogan. I like to say Erdogan because it just sounds less intelligent than Erdogan. Yeah, Erdogan. It sounds like the noise that Ken and Ryu make in Street Fighter 2. Erdogan. Anyway, you got this other article here that Turkey is on the verge of an economic collapse, and if Turkey does collapse economically, it could send millions of migrants into Europe, another wave of migrants into the European Union, well, to just, exacerbate that crisis that's going on. They're saying millions could go to the European Union if this happens. Mainstream media periodical Newsweek, according to Jack Montgomery, suggests that a scenario could have major political consequences for globalist leaders such as Germany's Angela Merkel, who effectively opened the EU's borders unilaterally in 2015, but has been under pressure since the onset of the subsequent migrant crisis and a historically poor performance in the 2017 federal elections. We're talking about Deutschland's elections in this case. So, I don't know. And, with some of these people that look at geopolitics and they look at the games of chess that you could play, you could say maybe President Trump is trying to send a message and maybe kind of kill two birds with one stone here. I'll put tariffs on Turkey and then puts Angela Merkel in a little bit of a difficult situation. I mean, say what you want to. Germany, I mean, I know they're trying to pay their fair share now when it comes to NATO, but I got a feeling that if Donald Trump is willing to publicly say that Germany's a hypocrite for inking a pipeline deal with Russia while claiming they need protection from Russia while they're making Russia rich, if President Trump is willing to say that publicly, you got to wonder what he's willing to say privately, right? You would assume that he's willing to go further in his criticism of Deutschland privately, wouldn't you? Anyway, it's quite fascinating to watch, and I think for the first time in my lifetime, we're actually watching what it's like for America to lead on the world stage. Instead of, it eventually deteriorated to President Obama saying we're leading from behind. Remember when he said that, or somebody in his administration said that? Crazy times, folks. Interesting times. We'll keep you updated. Don't forget to go to conduitnews.com. Feel free to go there, get the audio podcast, get the video archives, like us on Facebook, and go to the YouTube channel and click subscribe and click the little bell for notifications for our smaller videos. We would appreciate that. Arkansas, have a great weekend. Have a great day. Be safe.